What if Princess Diana faked her death to escape? What if everything we thought we knew about her tragic end was a lie? An elaborate cover-up for something far darker? 3 months ago, I received a mysterious package sealed with Diana's personal emblem, and what I found inside would change everything. It led me to a chilling truth, one that not only shatters history, but puts my life in immediate danger. And this story, it's one no one would believe unless they saw it for themselves. It arrived on a Tuesday, just like any other ordinary mail, but the moment I saw it, something felt off. No return address, no markings, just a plain white package. But the seal on the back, that was unmistakable. The emblem of Princess Diana, a rose and a crown. My heart stopped. I'd seen that seal before. It was on the personal stationery she used for private letters. Letters that no one outside the royal family had ever seen. I stood there, holding the package in my hands, feeling an overwhelming sense of dread creep over me. What was this? And why now? It was as if the universe had decided that today, of all days, was the moment for me to discover something I wasn't supposed to know. I couldn't help myself. I ripped open the package. Inside, there was nothing but a small brass key and a slip of paper with a single line scribbled in neat handwriting. The truth is buried at 57 Ridgeway Road. Below that, coordinates were printed out in a font so clean, it could have been typed by a machine. What the hell was this? I turned the paper over, but there was nothing else. Just the key, small and old-fashioned, sitting there like a piece of history. What did it open? The coordinates led to a storage facility outside London, one I'd never heard of. I had to go. There was no reason to, but I was drawn to it, like a moth to a flame. But still, something was gnawing at me. I wasn't the only one who would want to find what was inside that storage unit. There was no way this could be a coincidence. Princess Diana was dead. Or was she? The rumors, the theories, the whispers, none of it made sense. But this key, this message, it felt like a message directly from her. And if it was, then I needed to find out why. The tension in my chest grew heavier. I hadn't thought about what would happen if I actually went to the facility. Who was behind this? Why me? And if I opened that storage unit, what exactly was I going to find? As I stared at the key in my hand, my mind raced. What if this was a trap? What if someone was watching me already? The sensation of eyes on me was so real, so palpable, I could almost hear someone's breath behind me. I glanced over my shoulder. Empty. Just the quiet hum of the street outside. But that feeling of being watched lingered. After a long pause, I finally made my decision. I couldn't leave this alone. If I didn't go, I would never know what Diana had left behind. What was the harm in a quick trip? What if this was my one chance to uncover something that the world was desperate to keep hidden? I arrived at the storage facility the next afternoon. The road winding through a part of London I hadn't even known existed. It felt out of place, almost eerie. The buildings looked too quiet. The kind of place you'd expect no one to be around, like time itself had forgotten it. I parked and took a deep breath, feeling the weight of what I was about to do settle in. It was only a storage facility. I didn't expect to find anything groundbreaking, certainly not a clue to Princess Diana's death. But then again, I had no idea what I was walking into. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out the key. Holding it in my palm, almost feeling the history in it. The facility itself was old, dusty, one of those places that looked like it hadn't seen a human in years. The lock on the door of the unit where the coordinates led me was rusted and old, the kind you only see on buildings too long forgotten. I slid the key into the lock, the sound of metal on metal echoing in the quiet like a warning. When the door finally opened, I was hit by a strange smell, sharp, almost antiseptic, with a strange sweetness hanging in the air. It made me uneasy. Inside, there was nothing but a cold metallic table, a laptop, and a single refrigerated case, locked tight. I walked in, my eyes darting around the room, scanning for anything unusual. I didn't know what I was expecting to find, but I hadn't expected this. The laptop was old, but functional. I reached for it, hesitated, and then opened it. It was password protected, the screen asking me for a code. But there was a note taped to the bottom, handwritten in the same neat script as the message on the paper. Engagement. I felt my heart race. Diana's engagement to Prince Charles. That date, the moment when everything changed for her, for them. I entered the date on the keyboard, almost as if I knew what would happen. The screen flashed, and then hours of video logs began to appear. But this wasn't the Diana I remembered. Not even close. In the first video, she sat there, looking directly at the camera. Her face was slightly different, her eyes a little too intense, but the way she spoke, the words she used, it was her, but not quite. "If you're watching this, they finally made a mistake," she said, her voice calm but heavy with something deeper, something I couldn't quite place. "I need someone to know what they did to us." I froze. U.S. Not me. U.S. That wasn't a slip of the tongue. She had meant to say that. Who else was she talking about? And just like that, the entire world I thought I knew started to shatter. The mysteries surrounding Diana's life and death were no longer theories. They were a reality, a horrifying, incomprehensible truth that I could barely grasp. But I wasn't done yet. The refrigerated case, why hadn't I opened it sooner? What I discovered in that case was more than just evidence of a twisted secret. It was something that would change everything I thought I knew about Princess Diana, and thrust me deeper into a world I was never meant to uncover. The air inside the storage unit was heavy, stale, as if it had been sealed off from the outside world for far too long. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, each thump matching the rapid beat of my pulse. This place felt wrong. There was a strange energy in the air, like the very walls were holding secrets, dark ones. I could feel something shifting, something watching me, though the place appeared empty. I stood frozen, staring at the laptop in front of me. The video logs were endless. Hours and hours of footage, all of Diana, but not the Diana the world remembered. This wasn't just about uncovering the truth of her death. This was something far darker, something no one was meant to know. I clicked the first video. It was dated just weeks after her death. The Diana on screen wasn't just alive. She looked different. Her eyes were too intense, her smile too calculated. Her voice, though unmistakably hers, seemed slightly off, like she had been forced to play a role she didn't entirely understand. The video began with her staring directly into the camera, and as she spoke, her words cut deep into my gut. "If you're watching this, then they finally made a mistake. It's been so many years now, and still the truth hasn't come out. But I need someone to know what they did to us. Us. Her eyes flickered for just a moment, and that's when I realized she wasn't talking about herself. She was speaking about others. Others like her. The chill in my spine deepened. Who was she talking about? As the video continued, Diana's calm, controlled voice detailed the most horrifying thing I could have ever imagined. She wasn't the real Diana. She was a replica, a genetic clone created as part of an extensive royal family project, a project that had been going on for decades. My stomach twisted in knots as her words began to sink in. My death wasn't an accident. It was part of the plan. I wasn't the original Diana. I was the third version, Replicant 3.0. The royal family has been experimenting with genetic replication since the 1970s. She spoke with an eerie calmness, as though this was just another part of her life, one she had come to accept, but that didn't make it any less disturbing. My mind was spinning. How could this be possible? How had the world been so wrong about her death? How had they gotten away with it for so long? She continued, detailing the horrific truth. Diana's pregnancies with William and Harry hadn't just been about securing heirs for the throne. They had been carefully controlled experiments designed to harvest genetic material for the replicas. The DNA of her children had been used, taken without her knowledge, to fuel the process. I discovered this by accident, she explained, her tone now more distant, as though she was remembering a painful past. I found documents in Charles's study, hidden beneath the floorboards. That's when I realized what they had been doing to me, to us. I sat there, unable to move, unable to process what I was hearing. What had they done to her? To the children? But then, the most chilling part of the video came. I wasn't the original Diana. I'm a clone. A third successful attempt after the first two failed. But the problem is, we weren't meant to last. She went on to explain the horrors of cellular degradation. The technology behind the cloning process was flawed. With every generation of replicas, the clones were more and more unstable. The clones were deteriorating physically and mentally at a terrifying rate. And Diana, replica number 3, was no exception. We were never meant to be permanent, just long enough to fulfill our role, to serve our purpose. Once our bodies began to break down, we were discarded, and no one was supposed to know. But here I am. Her voice cracked slightly as she spoke those words, but the message was clear. The replicas weren't just royal doubles, they were disposable, used for a greater purpose. I sat there, in stunned silence, my heart racing. This wasn't just about Diana's death. This was about a systematic program of exploitation and inhumanity. A program that had been going on for decades, right under everyone's nose. I couldn't wrap my head around it. The scale of the operation, the lives destroyed, manipulated for the sake of the crown, for the sake of genetic power. Diana had been a pawn in a game she didn't even know she was playing. And the replicas, they were nothing more than vessels to be used and discarded. They made us, and they controlled us. But some of us escaped, and I'm one of the lucky ones. But the world needs to know the truth. They need to know what they did to me, what they did to all of us. Her final words echoed in my mind. The truth was more horrifying than I had ever imagined. Diana had been part of an experiment, one that had stolen her identity, her life, and her very humanity. And she wasn't alone. There were others, replicas just like her, forced to live in the shadows, hidden away from the world. And then the camera switched to a new video. The footage was grainy, older, but the face on screen was unmistakable. Another Diana, a replica. But this one was different. Her eyes were cold, unfeeling. That's when I realized the truth wasn't just about Diana. It was about the royal family's brutal and calculated manipulation of genetics, about the destruction of human lives for power, for control. And I was about to learn just how far they would go to keep this secret buried. What I uncovered was more than just a secret. It was a warning. I spent days watching the videos, each one more horrifying than the last. Diana's calm, detached narration felt like a nightmare. She wasn't just revealing the truth about her life. She was exposing a world of unimaginable horror, one that had been kept hidden for decades. The deeper I got into the footage, the more I realized that the story I thought I knew about Diana was nothing but a fabrication, a lie. She wasn't the beloved princess we all mourned. She had never been. In the next video, Diana's tone shifted. She looked directly at the camera, her eyes burning with a quiet fury that was impossible to ignore. "You want to know the truth?" she began, almost whispering. "They didn't just create replicas of me for show. They created me for one reason: genetic harvesting. I was meant to bear children, and I was meant to serve them, royals, politicians, anyone who had the power to buy access to my blood. My genetic material was worth more than gold." I felt my stomach churn. This wasn't just about cloning. This wasn't about making body doubles to fill a royal need. This was something more sinister. An entire industry built on exploiting one woman's DNA for profit and power. Diana's face hardened, her jaw clenching as she continued. It was supposed to be a simple operation. I was to bear heirs, serve my purpose, and then disappear. But what they didn't account for was the one thing they couldn't control: me. Her voice shook slightly as she spoke, revealing the anger she had suppressed for years. When I started to ask questions, I realized the truth. My life, my very existence, was a product of manipulation. I wasn't a princess. I wasn't even a real person. I was a vessel for their twisted project. The reality of what she was saying sank in like ice water. Her entire life had been a lie. She had been used, manipulated, and discarded. She was never Diana, the woman we all believed in. She was a biological machine, nothing more. They didn't care about my happiness, my pain, or my freedom. They cared about power. They cared about controlling the very fabric of human genetics. I wasn't the only one. They'd been doing this for years. Diana replicas. Each one of us was a different iteration, created and destroyed in a cycle that no one was ever supposed to know about. Her words felt like daggers. The whole world had been deceived, and the truth had been buried, hidden behind a carefully crafted mask of royalty and tragedy. But now, in these videos, Diana had exposed it all. The videos continued, growing more personal. She spoke of the things she had discovered, the horror she had uncovered within the royal family's secretive operations. She described finding hidden documents detailing the creation of multiple clones, including herself. Each one a failed experiment in the pursuit of perfection. Her voice softened as she talked about the most devastating realization of all. They never wanted me to live. She paused, the silence between us deafening, as if the weight of her words had sunk in. The originals, she whispered. They never intended for us to survive. The replicas were designed to degrade quickly, physically, mentally, emotionally. We were programmed to fade, to fall apart. We were expendable. The video cut abruptly, leaving me with more questions than answers. My mind was reeling, spinning in a haze of disbelief. Diana had never been who we thought she was. She had never had the life the world believed she had. She had been a puppet, controlled, manipulated, and discarded once she was no longer useful. The next video was different. Diana's demeanor had changed. She no longer appeared cold or distant. There was fear in her eyes now. The kind of fear that comes from knowing the truth is about to destroy everything you've ever known. This was the beginning of the end for me, she said, her voice trembling. I couldn't let them do it to another. I couldn't let them keep creating us, destroying us without a care. I leaned forward, eyes fixed on the screen, barely breathing. What had she done next? She talked about how she had learned of the royal family's ongoing plans to create new replicas, clones that would continue to serve as vessels for their twisted vision of genetic power. They were breeding us for a purpose, she said, her words slow and deliberate. We were never meant to last. She paused again, her gaze intense. But one of us managed to escape. My heart skipped a beat. One of the replicas had escaped? I was that replica, she whispered, almost as if confessing to something unforgivable. I was the one who got out. I managed to break free, to live off the grid. I've been collecting evidence for years, preparing to bring this all down. But time is running out. I don't have much left. My body's breaking down just like the others. A chill ran down my spine. Diana wasn't just a victim. She had become a crusader, gathering evidence to expose the truth that no one was supposed to know. And I was now part of that story, connected to her in ways I couldn't understand. I don't know how much longer I have, she continued. But if you're watching this, it means I've failed. It means they found me. But I need you to know this. The world will never be the same once this is out. The royals, the elites, they'll stop at nothing to keep it hidden. They'll kill to protect their secrets. But this can't stay buried. Her face appeared one last time, staring at me with a mixture of sadness and resolve. They may have made me, but they can never own me. And they'll never own the truth. The last words she spoke haunted me. The truth will come out. It has to. I sat there, staring at the screen, my mind struggling to comprehend what I had just witnessed. Diana had become something more than a princess. She had become a martyr for a cause, a victim of a system so vast, so cruel, that it seemed impossible to believe. But as I sat there, digesting the truth, I knew one thing for certain. The real Diana had died that night in Paris. But the truth was far more dangerous than anyone could have ever imagined. I wasn't just watching history unfold. I was part of it now. And what Diana had started, I was about to finish. The coordinates led me to Switzerland, to an abandoned medical facility hidden in a remote area, far off the beaten path. It felt like I had stepped into another world, a forgotten world. The air was heavy, like it hadn't been disturbed in years. A thick layer of dust covered everything, and the silence was almost oppressive. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched, though the place appeared empty. My breath quickened, a knot tightening in my chest. What was I about to uncover? Diana had said she had been gathering evidence, but why had she led me here? What was in this decaying facility that had once been a hub of horrific activity? I hesitated for a moment before forcing myself to move forward, my feet crunching on the brittle floor. The door was rusted, barely hanging on its hinges. The facility looked as if it had been abandoned in a hurry. It didn't take long to find the elevator, a service elevator that appeared to be the only way deeper into the building. I inserted the same key I had found in the storage unit, the one with the royal seal. The elevator doors creaked open, revealing a dimly lit shaft. As the doors closed behind me, I felt the cold weight of inevitability pressing down on me. The elevator descended, rattling slightly as it made its way deeper into the facility. I braced myself. What was I about to find? When the doors finally opened, I was greeted by a scene straight out of a nightmare. The walls were lined with rows of preservation tanks, most of them empty, some still filled with a murky yellowish fluid. The tanks were large, cylindrical, their contents hidden behind condensation and grime. Some were still operational. I stepped forward cautiously, the sound of my footsteps echoing in the vast, empty space. There was something deeply wrong about this place. The sterile, cold environment reminded me of a morgue. But this was no morgue. The tubes and machines scattered around were not just for preservation. They were for something else, something unspeakable. Then, I saw it. A face. I froze in place, my blood turning to ice. A face staring back at me from one of the active tanks. I wiped the condensation off the glass and nearly vomited. It was Diana, but not the Diana I remembered. Her face was bloated, twisted, her eyes closed, and her features stretched in ways that didn't make sense. Her body was suspended in the fluid, but her limbs, her arms, were too long. Her fingers had fused together. Her skin was marked with lesions. This wasn't the woman who had captured the world's heart. This was a failure. One of the failed replicas. A grotesque result of the royal family's twisted genetic experiments. I stepped back, my heart hammering in my chest. I wanted to run, to get out of there, but something held me in place. I had to know. What had happened here? What had Diana uncovered? What was the royal family willing to do to keep this secret buried? I moved slowly, my mind racing. As I approached the central console, I saw the flashing light on a nearby terminal, still somehow powered on. It was a security system, one that had been left active even after the facility had been abandoned. The screen flickered as I accessed the files. The names, the project codes, everything had been documented here. It wasn't just Diana's cloning. This was a full-scale operation. One file stood out. Operation Spencer Continuity. The project name struck me like a physical blow. Spencer, Diana's maiden name. This was it. This was the project that had birthed the replicas. The one that had been kept hidden from the public for so long. I opened the file, and what I saw sent chills down my spine. The documents outlined the entire operation, the cloning procedures, the genetic manipulation, and the detailed list of subjects, replicas created to replace members of the royal family when the time came. But it didn't stop there. There were photos of other women who looked remarkably like Diana, living in different parts of the world. A school teacher in New Zealand, a doctor in Canada, an artist in Italy, all clones, all part of the same horrific experiment. I was sickened. Diana was not the first. She had been one of many. The royal family had created a legacy of clones, each one meant to serve a twisted purpose, and they had been kept hidden, monitored, manipulated, all for the sake of power, of control. As I scrolled through the files, the security footage loaded. The video showed a bustling lab, scientists in unmarked lab coats working tirelessly on the tanks. They were tending to the failed replicas. They were harvesting tissue, examining genetic material, treating them as nothing more than disposable vessels. I couldn't tear my eyes away from the screen. In one frame, I froze the image. There it was again. The clipboard with the project name, Operation Spencer Continuity. It was the same name, the same twisted plan. But there was more. There were photos attached to the file, images of other failed experiments, other replicas. I wiped away more condensation from another tank, my stomach lurching as I stared into the lifeless eyes of yet another replica. Her body was pale, deformed, barely human in appearance. She looked like a broken version of Diana, one of the earlier attempts. Her limbs were too short, her face too flat. She was barely recognizable. This was what had been happening behind closed doors. This was the truth Diana had been trying to expose. The royal family had been harvesting her genetics, creating replicas, each one a failure, each one discarded when they no longer served their purpose. But Diana, replica number 7, had managed to escape. She was the one who had gotten out. And she had been fighting to expose the truth ever since. But they were still coming for her. And now, they were coming for me. As I stood there, surrounded by the horrors of what the royal family had been doing for decades, my phone buzzed. The message was simple. You've seen too much, but I can help you. Meet me tomorrow if you want to live. The message was chilling, and the reality of what it meant settled over me like a thick fog. I had seen too much, but who could help me? Who was watching? And why would they want to meet me? I didn't waste time wondering. I had to go. Time was running out, and every second felt like a countdown. The eerie silence of the abandoned medical facility seemed to press in on me, suffocating, as though the building itself was holding its breath, waiting for something, waiting for me to leave. I took the elevator back up, my heart pounding in my chest. And when I emerged into the cold, stale air of the outside world, the sun was already dipping below the horizon. A new danger was closing in. The coordinates on the message led me to a small, nondescript building in the middle of a quiet part of the city. No signs, no windows, just a metal door with a security keypad. I stood in front of it, my breath shallow, heart racing. This was it. I had no choice but to go in. Whoever had sent the message knew what I had seen, and they were offering me a way out. But at what cost? I hesitated for only a moment before punching in the numbers I'd been given, and the door clicked open with a faint mechanical whine. Inside was dark. Only a single light bulb flickered overhead, casting long shadows that seemed to move on their own. The figure who stepped forward was tall, his face partially obscured by the shadows. Thomas. He was exactly as described in the message. A man with an unsettling presence. His sharp, calculating eyes looked me up and down before he spoke, his voice low and measured. "You've seen the truth," he said simply, his gaze never leaving mine. It wasn't a question. He already knew. I nodded, too stunned to speak at first. My mind was still reeling from what I had just uncovered. The replicas, the royal family's genetic experiments, Diana's real purpose. It was more than I could process, but one thing was clear. I was in too deep now. There was no turning back. "You're not the first to uncover this," Thomas continued, taking a step closer. "And you won't be the last. There are others like Diana. Clones created for the royal family's twisted agenda. They have been hiding in plain sight for years." He paused, watching me carefully. "But they didn't count on you finding out." I swallowed hard, my throat dry. I wanted to ask him 1,000 questions. Who was he? What was his role in all this? But he answered them before I could speak. "I was part of the team. I worked on the program for years," he said, his voice quiet but resolute. "But when I realized what they were really doing, I couldn't stand by anymore. I had to help them. Help her." He gestured toward the storage unit, toward the horrors that had been stored inside those tanks. "Help Diana." I flinched at the mention of her name. It felt surreal to think about her, the Diana I had known, the one the world adored. She wasn't just a princess, a mother, a tragic figure in the media. She was a victim, just like the others. "Diana's death was not an accident," Thomas continued, his eyes darkening. "It wasn't a car crash. She died in a procedure, a routine extraction. But something went wrong. She was supposed to be retired. They had the first replica in place, ready to take her place, but Diana fought to the end." His voice was thick with emotion, his hands clenched at his sides. "She was the third replica, but she wasn't the first to die. The original Diana, the real one, died during the early stages of the project. That's when they started experimenting with her DNA, creating replicas, creating us. Diana's death was staged to cover up the truth. The public would never know." The weight of his words hit me like a sledgehammer. I had always known there was something off about her death. The official story never sat right with me. But this was beyond comprehension. They had been making clones for decades, creating living, breathing replicas to replace the royal family when needed. Thomas wasn't done. "The replicas were designed to degrade quickly," he explained. "But Diana, she was different. She was meant to live longer. Her DNA was unique. That's why they kept her alive as long as they could. She was a vessel. Her genetic material was precious. It had sovereign proteins, something that could grant longevity, perhaps even immortality." He paused, looking at me with a kind of sad acknowledgement. "And that's why she had to die. She was too dangerous, too powerful." I couldn't take it in. Immortality. Diana's genetic material, the secret of royal longevity, had been the true purpose of her existence. This wasn't just about cloning. It was about preserving power, controlling life itself. And Diana had never been the queen. She had been a vessel for their twisted ambition. "But you're different." Thomas's voice snapped me back to the present. He handed me a small vial of blood, the liquid inside a deep, dark red. "This is what she wanted you to have. But I need to warn you, once you take this, there's no going back." I stared at the vial, my pulse quickening. What was in it? What had Diana put in my hands? I could feel the weight of it, not just physically, but mentally. This was a choice. Take the vial and embrace whatever fate awaited me. Or walk away. Pretend I had never seen any of this. But there was no walking away now. "You're part of this now," Thomas said, his eyes narrowing. "Diana knew you would be. She chose you for a reason. But once you take that vial, once you take what's inside, you're not just an observer anymore. You'll become part of her plan." The decision seemed to hang in the air, heavy and suffocating. What was I really getting into? "I'm in," I said, finally breaking the silence. I didn't fully understand it all, but one thing was clear. This wasn't just Diana's story anymore. This was mine too. Taking the vial wasn't just about learning the truth. It was about becoming part of a deadly revenge. And once I took it, everything I thought I knew would be turned on its head. It started slowly, like a whisper in the back of my mind. The first sign was the headache, sharp, throbbing, relentless. I tried to ignore it, convinced it was just the stress of everything I had learned in the past few days. But it didn't stop. The pain grew worse, settling deep behind my eyes, making it hard to focus. I could feel something inside me shifting, something biological, like my body was being pulled in different directions. Then came the fever. It hit me suddenly, intense and burning. My skin felt like it was on fire, but I was freezing at the same time. The temperature of my own body had become unbearable. I could feel my pulse quicken, my heart pounding in my chest like it was trying to escape. My skin became hypersensitive, as though the very air around me was pressing down on me. I thought it was just a reaction to the vial, to whatever Diana had injected into me. But it wasn't just that. It was something else, something more. I went to the mirror, hoping to see nothing more than exhaustion. But what I saw wasn't me anymore. My face, my features, they were changing. Slowly, imperceptibly at first, but it was there. My cheekbones were higher. My eyes, just slightly lighter, were beginning to shift in color. I wasn't just getting sick. I was transforming. I was becoming something else, something I couldn't control. Panic set in. I stumbled backward, my breath coming in sharp gasps. What had I done? I had taken the vial. I had chosen to follow Diana's path, but this wasn't just information. This was something irreversible. The nanoparticles in my blood were doing exactly what they were designed to do, rewriting my DNA, making me more like her, like Diana. The changes were happening faster now, too fast for me to keep up. The pain, the fever, it was overwhelming. I couldn't think clearly. I couldn't stop it. The transformation was taking over. I could feel it in my bones, in my muscles, in my very blood. But the most terrifying part, the more I looked at myself, the more I saw her. Not just her face, but her body, her movements, her voice. I reached for my phone, dialing Thomas's number, but there was no answer. The message was clear. I was on my own. And the worst part? I didn't know what would happen next. What had Diana chosen for me? Was this transformation part of her revenge? What was the plan? The change was accelerating faster than I could handle. But what I didn't know was that Diana's revenge had already begun, and I was about to become the trigger for it. The transformation was complete, but I barely recognized myself anymore. My reflection in the mirror was both familiar and foreign, like I was looking at someone else's face. Diana's face. The subtle changes had turned into something unrecognizable, but not enough to betray me yet. Not enough to expose me to the people I was about to infiltrate. It was enough to confuse their security systems.
I had no time to waste. I had to act quickly. The facility in London where the royal secret experiments continued was my next target. I couldn't wait for Thomas to reappear. He was gone, and I was alone in this, walking a thin line between uncovering the truth and becoming part of the very conspiracy I had sworn to destroy.
I used the credentials Thomas had given me, entering the facility without suspicion. The biometric scanner registered me as authorized, though it didn't know exactly who I was. The scanners were confused, matching my genetic code, but unsure of my identity. They were looking for a Diana replica, but they couldn't tell which one. That confusion bought me precious seconds as I slipped past the guards. Inside, the sterile, cold atmosphere was overwhelming. The white walls, the gleaming machines. All of it felt wrong. This was where they had perfected their horrifying work, where the royal family's obsession with immortality had taken root. I knew what I had to do: get the data, expose the files, and trigger Diana's revenge. But there was something else. Something worse. I could feel it in my bones. The deeper I went, the closer I got to something that wasn't just about genetics anymore. I moved swiftly, checking the halls for security. I was just another replica, another piece of their puzzle. Except now, I had a purpose. I wasn't meant to be hidden away or discarded. I was meant to destroy everything they had built. I found the central database and accessed the files, downloading everything I could. Names, dates, experiments, all of it. The entire operation exposed in one click. But as I did, I could hear the alarms begin to wail. They'd figured out what I was doing. Security flooded the building, but it was too late. I had what I needed. The data would bring this whole operation to its knees. The world would finally see the truth. But the worst part was yet to come. The nanoparticles in my blood, Diana's last gift, had begun to activate. As I moved through the facility, the system detected me as Spencer variant, but they couldn't pinpoint which one. That's when the real danger began.
I was no longer a mere witness. I was the weapon.
Final payoff. The alarms blared, chaos erupting as the data I stole spread like wildfire. The truth was out. The royal family's secret was exposed. But the real horror? The nanoparticles in my blood. Diana's revenge had begun. As I left the facility, I could feel the infection taking hold, targeting everyone involved in the program: royals, scientists, handlers. They would fall, one by one. Days passed, and the contagion spread. The royals' immortality was shattered. Those responsible were falling ill, and no one could explain it. But I knew the cause. Diana's plan had worked perfectly. I've stopped looking in mirrors. I don't recognize myself anymore. The changes haven't stopped, but I carry Diana's legacy now. Her revenge is complete. I still dream of her, walking through a garden of roses, leaving red petals behind. The truth is in the blood, and it always will be.